Patriots Radio Show. This is actually kind of an interesting event. This is our first live town hall meeting. We are doing live streaming on the internet, so if you are actually at our website, the one or two of you that have nothing better to do on a Saturday night, then you are getting to see this live. And just to give you guys a heads up out there, we did have some technical difficulties. We do not have a live webcam shot on the audience. So you're just going to have to put up with me and our guest today. And so we're going to be doing a 30-minute interview. I'm going to be asking our guests some questions, and then we'll have some other people in the audience ask questions. But we got the whole hour with my guest, senatorial candidate, a Democrat. We want to point that out, Sean Hubbard. Sean, welcome to my show in this interesting event.
Thanks, Marcus. I'm excited.
Well, you should be. We're live. So, you know, if anything happens, can't take it back.
All right.
All right. Are you ready for the questions?
I'm ready.
All right, let's dive into it. My first question for you is, this is your first political race ever. You've never run for office. Why did you choose the U.S. Senate instead of running for Congress here in Texas?
Well, for one, I like to call the Senate the place where progressive legislation goes to die. And if you look at what the House was able to do while they had the majority, Democrats had the majority in the House, they were able to pass a cap-and-trade bill, a more progressive version of the health care bill, and then it all died in the Senate. I don't think the cap-and-trade bill ever got a vote in the Senate, never even came to a vote. And so I think that's where we needed a progressive representative. The Senate is the oldest and richest it's ever been. I believe 54 out of 100 senators are millionaires, and another 6 or 8 are within $100,000 of that mark. And while it's great that some folks are able to be wealthy, it's not very representative of the population as a whole when our government reaches that kind of levels among their representatives. And so we looked at the various races, and so some folks might not consider it, but on the Democratic side, we consider most of the districts pretty gerrymandered here.
Okay, so that's the next question I was going to ask you, is if it had anything to do with gerrymandering.
Part of that did factor into the equation. I live in Dallas, and I'm in a district that extends all the way almost to Sherman.
For anybody that needs a map or anything, that's a long way away, and it's weird that way. Anyway.
It's a very oddly shaped district.
Yes.
But mostly, you can make the most impact in the Senate. One senator can break a filibuster.
I guess that kind of makes sense. I mean, I can see why you would want to run for the Senate and everything. But at the same time, I mean, Congress is where most people like Kennedy, you know, JFK, they started in Congress to gain experience before they went on to the next step. So, but anyway, moving right along, we're going to get to the economy, since it's the biggest issue here in Texas and across America and everything. With unemployment the way it is, and people talking about it, what solutions do you see as a candidate that can be done to help fix our economy? Or is it really up to Congress or the Senate to fix our economy?
Well, in times of serious economic downturn, the problem you have, like we had in the Great Depression and like we currently have, is a lack of aggregate demand. Businesses and consumers aren't spending money. The only entity that is able to spend money is the federal government. State governments can't do it. Local governments can't do it because they're limited by their charters and state constitutions on deficit spending. So I believe what we have to do is expand upon the stimulus and spend money where it needs to be spent. Rebuilding roads and bridges, giving aid to state and local governments so they don't have to lay off workers. If you see this this last month, we created 225,000, I think it was, private sector jobs. But we only had a net gain of 200,000 because of the layoffs at state and local government level. And so I think the federal government must step in. I've been working with Professor Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize-winning economist, who was the head of Clinton's economic advisors. And he's former head economist for the World Bank. And he's written a book called Free Fall. It takes a series of steps, includes tax reform, banking reform, bringing back a modified version of the Glass-Steagall Act to ensure that banks can't crash our economy again, that commercial banks won't be able to take the outsized risk that led to crashing our economy. The other thing I'm looking at is creating a high-speed freight and passenger rail system. Passenger rail alone, I don't believe is sustainable, but I think if we combine it with freight, started at a port in Houston, we've got a big port project going down in Houston, and I think we could start there, expand that to the nation. It would create thousands of jobs, and so I that's what's worked in the past. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think most of the people out there don't even know the professor that you're talking about.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that while most people don't know who he is smarter than Joe the plumber. So we probably should pay attention to people like him more than Joe the plumber. You know, who would have thought we'd be still talking about Joe the plumber 4 years later?
I know.
But I mean, at the same time, I mean, we keep talking about, it's always about average Americans and all that, but sometimes running a race is about being smart, don't you think?
Yes.
And here's the other problem I have with dealing with the economy. We live in a country that manufactures less and less, okay? And the middle class is dying off. I mean, they just did a poll here this past week saying that 1 out of 3 of the middle class has gone away as below the income means in the U.S. Do you think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't have those middle class manufacturing jobs that we once had 40, 50 years ago due to outsourcing?
I think that's a big part of it, yes, and something we could do to fix that is start enforcing trade agreements. Force our trade partners to have the same kind of environmental and worker protections that we have.
So you want our government to do what it's supposed to do?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
You mean holding government officials accountable?
Yes.
All right, interesting. All right.
It's a new concept, I know.
I know, it's weird. So moving right along, and I am looking at my trusty list of questions here. Let's get to immigration. Again, it's another big issue, and what would you propose in solving immigration problems in this state? To be more specific, do you support amnesty programs for illegal immigrants that are already here?
Well, I'll tell you about my immigration plan. We have estimates range from 12 to 20 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. To take that many people and round them up and get them out of the country, it doesn't even seem like it's something that's doable. But the other aspect you have to look at is the shock to our economy to take out that many workers, that many consumers, suck them out of our economy right now. We're already, as I mentioned before, we're experiencing a lack of demand.
Yeah, but you're saying workers. Are you talking about workers that pay taxes?
Undocumented immigrants still do pay taxes.
Really?
Yes. They pay more tax.
It's not more just cash underneath the table. And
Undocumented immigrants paid more taxes than GE did last year.
Well, yes, I think every middle class person paid more taxes than GE and ExxonMobil.
But what we have to do is we have to address the demand for undocumented workers. We have to start punishing those companies that are intentionally hiring undocumented.
So you are in favor of holding companies accountable that hire illegal immigrants?
Oh yes. But what we have to do as well is make it easier for them to identify who is an undocumented immigrant. And I don't have the solution for what system needs to be in place to make it easier for them to identify who is a documented immigrant and who isn't. But we definitely have to start punishing them because what they're exploiting undocumented workers to drive down wages, which hurts American workers as well.
See, and that's the other thing I never understood, especially from Republicans who rail against, illegal immigrants. How are you going to pay for rounding everybody up? Well, especially when you're giving tax cuts to everybody.
Exactly,
like
the cost of rounding them.
Not that I'm saying that, they have the right idea or anything, but I mean, I just don't see how we could feasibly pay for something like that,
Well, and to get back to what I was saying, it's much like the drug problem we have in the United States. Drug traffickers are going to keep bringing drugs into the nation as long as there's a demand for it. Undocumented workers come here to make a better life. So they're going to continue to come into the country through an undocumented process because there's a demand for them.
See,
the demand for the cheap labor.
And now you just opened up a door for another question that I always want to ask. Where do you stand on the legalization of marijuana?
I'm not sure where I stand on the legalization. I do favor decriminalization. I think there are far too many people in prison for marijuana possession charges. Legalization is an issue I still kind of struggle with. I'm not exactly sure where I stand on it.
Isn't it just another prohibition? I mean, it seems like the government always has to bring out some prohibition of something and with their own moral code of what we can and cannot do. I mean, really, marijuana. I mean, I've I think it's pretty much been documented that nicotine is worse than marijuana, and yet that's still legal.
My one concern about legalization that kind of holds me up is the potential to legitimize the violent drug traffickers. All of a sudden, they're legitimate businessmen if you legalize marijuana. So if we could find a way to do it that would prevent them from becoming legitimate businessmen all of a sudden, I would definitely be willing to look at it.
Yeah, but still, there's some legal business owners that have own gas stations around where I live too that get a little violent too. So I mean, no. Anyway, I thought I'd throw the marijuana question out there since we do talk about it and all that, and see if we could get a common sense answer. But I could, at least you're honest if you admit that you don't have all the answers. That's one thing that's always bugged me about politicians. Like, I have all the answers. It's in my 3-point plan.
Yeah.
See, and
not everything fits into a 3-point plan.
No, it really doesn't. So, anyway, let's see. Ooh, let's get to education, since education is another big one. What do you think is the biggest problem with our educational system in America, more specific public schools?
I think our biggest problem is we've gone through a period of anti-intellectualism. And in some communities, in poor communities, you're mocked for doing well in school or for speaking a certain way. I think one of the things we have to do is change our attitude about education in this country. We have to prioritize it. But that has to start with our government. Every time that we have a budget shortfall, say in the state of Texas, we cut education funding. That's always the first thing we cut. We go right for the education funding. What kind of message does that send to the community? It sends that we in Texas, we in America don't value education.
Yeah, but here in the state of Texas, we do have a lot of people that favor more local law. They figure that they can educate their children better.
And I get that, but here in the state of Texas, we have folks on our education board that are that have no experience in the education field, that are ministers.
Right, and the same people that when I try to explain to them that sometimes maybe we need government, they're replied to me as OMG. I think that's a good example of why we need to have higher standards.
Yes. Well, and you look at the recent textbook issue, the history books, where they're taking Thomas Jefferson out and put the Heritage Foundation in.
Right.
Now I'm not sure who was more important in American history, Thomas Jefferson or the Heritage Foundation, but I think we can figure it out pretty easily. And so I think we have to have some minimum national curriculum and textbook standards. For one reason, because Texas is so large. We buy such a high percentage of textbooks. Textbook manufacturers will make them to fit Texas standards. And then smaller states are stuck buying the textbooks that we have ordered. And so now we've got kids in other states that are not learning about Thomas Jefferson, that they're learning about the Heritage Foundation. So you've got a group of folks in Austin that are pushing a political agenda through education. And it's not only affecting our state, but it's affecting others.
I know a lot of school teachers here in Texas, and one of the biggest things that they face is the issue of accountability when it comes to student behavior. Do you think that the accountability rests with public schools themselves, or do you think that the accountability for how a child acts really rests with the parents?
It really starts at home. I think I do get a bit concerned because we're so quick to bring criminal charges against students. And the police get involved so quickly. I think part of it is the school system not wanting to deal with the problem themselves, and so they've turned to the police. And so I think we need the schools to be more involved. But a lot of it has to do with parents. A lot of it we have to get as parents, and I'm a new parent.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Your life is really about to change now.
It has changed. I don't sleep anymore. But there's a lot of responsibility on the parent to raise your child the right way, but we can't have our school system passing on their responsibility as well and involving the police. For one, I think we have better things for the police to do than writing citations to students in schools. And in my day, you got suspended, you got detention, you got other issues.
Well, again, and getting back to that issue, one of the things that I see too is the fact that parents and teachers are never on the same side. That when a child gets in trouble at school, the parents are always quick to blame the school district and all that. How do our public schools deal with the fact that parents themselves aren't backing up what they're doing in regards to discipline and, and holding students accountable, not only from, their grades to, how they act and all that. I mean,
I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure anybody has an answer for how our schools can deal with parents that just want to blame the teachers all the time. I think that's something that's been going on for years, and honestly, I don't know what you can do at this point.
I don't know. I always recommend somebody like my mother who, pretty much told every teacher that I ever had that, oh yeah, you have every right to punish him. If he needs to be paddled, if he needs to be sent home, Saturday school, I'll make sure he's there.
Yeah.
And we talk about family values so much in elections,
But it's become more of a talking point, hasn't it? You've got the congressman from Illinois that campaigned on family values and hasn't paid child support in how many years, and he's been taking his new wife on international vacations.
That's right. Yeah,
but he's family values.
Yeah, like I was born in Illinois, and we have two sayings. One, you don't try to fight the Democratic machine; you just accept it. And B, it's the state where the governors make your license plate. So I mean,
Blagojevich, right?
Exactly. Illinois in the last 20 years has now had 2 governors go to federal prison for corruption. One of these days, maybe they'll learn. But then again, they haven't really throughout history.
It's still Illinois. I don't think they've learned yet.
Yeah. Of course, the other joke I like to make about Illinois too is every time they have to relocate a cemetery, all the politicians get mad because they just lost votes. So anyway, all right, we're going to jump to foreign policy, and there's a lot that's been going on with foreign policy. The first question I want to get in, or the issue that I want to get into, is the National Defense Act of 2012. Since it was pretty much something that the Senate voted on, and if you were elected to the Senate, or had been in the Senate, where you would stand on it, I think you are pretty much aware that 86 senators to 14 voted on this bill, which included the provision originally that the U.S. military could be used to capture terror suspects, not defining that, even on American soil, and hold them indefinitely without trial. Okay, would you have voted on something like that?
With that provision in it, no, I probably wouldn't have. That not only concerns me, but so does the killing of American citizens with a drone. I forget the guy's name. The terrorist. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And I know he was a terrorist and he was a bad guy, and maybe that was the only way we could have gotten him. I don't know. But I'm worried about the slippery slope that leads us down, and where does it go from there? When do we start killing potential murderers just based on an accusation? Just kill them in the street? Is that where we're headed next? So in those specific incidences, I don't think that it is that those specific cases may be the government was right, but I worry about where it's going to lead us, and so that's why I wouldn't have supported the Defense Act.
Well, I mean, I realize too that when President Obama signed it, I mean, he signed it after they had taken that particular provision out,
yes.
Which was great. I was actually quite proud of my president for doing that, and actually stating to the public that, we can't ruin one of the core principles of America by, not giving people the right to a fair trial. But at the same time, we still have provisions in the National Defense Act that says that the U.S. military can round up anybody linked to Al-Qaeda, okay, and including people on American soil, and hold them indefinitely. So I don't understand where the compromise on this issue is, okay? And even prisoners of war that we capture, people that we've held indefinitely in Guantanamo Bay without trial. We're always preaching about, the Geneva Convention and rules of engagement. Excuse me. Why sign it if you're still going to allow that and get back into that slippery slope?
Yeah, exactly. And
would you, even without that provision, would you have signed the bill?
I would be, at the very least, I would have been very reluctant to. I probably would not have liked to support it. They make the language intentionally vague as far as defining what's a terrorist subject.
Yeah.
In order to get me to vote for it, they would have had to clarify the language quite a bit on what is an actual terrorist suspect, and I don't think I could have gone with the indefinite detention.
Well, let's see, but
if we believe in our justice system, then we should have the courage to put terrorists on trial.
right.
And you know, President Obama promised to close Guantanamo Bay, but
Yeah,
but
it's still open.
but the Senate blocked him from taking the terrorists anywhere to try them. And so we were able to release ones that other nations would take. There was the Chinese group who had been suspected of terrorism. It turned out that the Chinese just wanted to get rid of them, and so we had them in Guantanamo for 5 or 6 years, and we found someone that was willing to take them, but it gets back to whether or not we believe in our justice system, whether or not we believe in the principles that this nation was founded on, that everybody had a right to a fair trial.
Well, see, the other thing I don't get is what criteria are we using to define terror suspect? Is a terror suspect somebody that was linked to Al-Qaeda specifically? Is it somebody that goes against what the White House, you know, whatever their policy is? Somebody that questions what our government is doing? I mean, again, we are opening the Pandora's box here, and that's slippery slope.
And that goes back to the Bush administration when, after September 11th. They just left everything intentionally vague so they could do what they wanted.
So, I mean, that's pretty much like saying if I criticize something on my show, I can be rounded up as a terrorist suspect, and
Because somebody suspects you're a terrorist.
exactly. Which, you know, the only thing I hope is if I get a cell like Guantanamo Bay, that you know, I at least get some kind of a window.
Yeah.
I'm tall, I can, you know.
Yeah, you can see.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The other thing that's been in the news this past week is Iran and the threat of them building a nuclear bomb. We have just gotten finished with the war in Iraq. We have, I guess, officially left now. I guess we're still fighting a war on terror. I don't know. I have to see the headlines and let the White House tell me whether we're fighting a war on terror. As we deal with the Iran threat, would you be willing to send in ground troops and go to war with this country to stop them from having a nuclear weapon?
See, that's a hard question to answer because I don't have access to intelligence reports and those kind of things. They would have to be posing a specific, verified, direct threat.
Concrete evidence,
yes,
to the lies we followed.
Exactly.
Right.
Because obviously Iran having nuclear weapons, it would be a concern. They're a very aggressive and hostile nation, but we would have to have concrete evidence of that. And I'm not going to go for someone holding up a little vial and saying there's chemical weapons there. Trust me.
I would like to think that as a nation we wouldn't be fooled again, but that may be asking too much.
Never overestimate Washington.
Yeah, right.
But
the gullibility of the American people. Yes, I said that.
But you know, I think there's other ways, much like we saw in Libya, of dealing with something without sending ground troops in. If we knew where their nuclear facilities are and we were concerned about it,
This is what I've been talking about. We build these bombs. Why don't we get to Houston? Come
exactly.
on.
We could take out their nuclear facilities if we knew where they were. And so I think there would be possible other ways of dealing with it. If we actually had that concrete evidence, we would obviously know it existed.
Here's the other issue too. I mean, you know, what is it? The second or third Iranian scientist has
Their security.
right.
And so
I'm pretty sure Israel can take everybody in the Middle East.
Exactly. And well, if it was something like Iran building a nuclear weapon, obviously is a serious concern to them. You know, they're within their rights to protect themselves the way they best see fit.
Right. Well, that makes sense. All right. And I apologize. I have actually been sick all week, so I try not to get the live audience or you sick. If you do get sick, feel free to blame me. That's okay. I get blamed.
Well, if I get sick and take it home to the daughter, my wife will come looking for us.
She's got to stand in a long line of women. Anyway, one last question, and I want to get to something that you announced this past week. But my question is, do you think a candidate's religion is really that important when running for office?
No, I don't.
Because, I mean, we make a lot of hay, so to speak, about a candidate's personal religion. and how that makes them a better candidate.
Something I found interesting from the Iowa Republican caucuses, if you look at evangelicals, Mitt Romney was choice number 4 or 5 for evangelicals. And so his religion has become an issue for him. At one time, being a Catholic was an issue running for office. John Kennedy had to overcome that. And so I think it's unfortunate that it is an issue, but it shouldn't be.
I agree. I just wanted to see what a Democratic candidate would actually say on that instead of trying to tell me how they were the best Christian to run for office. Or hold a prayer rally instead of an actual intellectual meeting to solve America's problems.
But it could make you could get some rain from a prayer rally maybe like 6 or 8 months later, though.
Well, don't tell Rick Perry that. We don't need to give him any more ideas. We want him out of the race, or at least I do. All right, you had a big announcement this week, something that you support about the anti-personhood corporation, and I probably just mixed up what it's actually called, but...
Bernie Sanders' amendment.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about...
It would be an amendment to the Constitution that would basically overrule Citizens United. And it would define corporations as not being people, which would take away their ability to spend freely in elections, such as super PACs.
So you're not a fan of super PACs?
I am not. No.
Even if it was a super PAC that could give you enough money to win a race, you wouldn't.
No. I think it's taken the choice away from the American people. I think we have to, at the very least, get rid of third parties. Third-party organizations and corporate money, but I really believe that we need to get to publicly financed campaigns. And I've come up with a plan that you could finance every campaign, not counting a presidential campaign, but every member of Congress, or every race for Congress and for the House, and 1/3 of the Senate is up for election every 2 years. So that 1/3 of the Senate, if you finance each candidate from both major parties, or each nominee from both major parties for every one of those offices, it would cost less than $1 billion.
Really?
And that's probably on the high side. That's taking the average cost of a winning campaign now, where you have to compete with super PACs. And so we could probably do it for even less than that.
So you don't have a sponsor yet?
I don't have a corporate sponsor, or I'd be wearing my NASCAR jumpsuit with my logos on it.
Oh, because I wanted to put a bumper sticker on. Just to be honest about it. I definitely think that it is something to talk about. And you want to talk about polls. Poll America about the U.S. Supreme Court decision 2 years ago about, saying that it was okay that corporations could donate. 90% of America will probably agree that that was the wrong decision that the Supreme Court made.
Well, if you look at the history of the Supreme Court, and I've studied the Supreme Court, the standard has always been for regulating speech, and that's essentially what this case was.
Right.
Has been a compelling governmental interest. Well, I would think a very compelling governmental interest is free, fair, and honest elections. I would have thought that would have done it right there, where they could have said no, corporations can't spend freely.
Well, it's a good thing you're not running in the state of Illinois, because now that you just said that, they would have kicked you out to Missouri or something.
They would run me out of the state, huh?
All right. Well, I've run through most of my list of questions, and I think that we should open it up to the audience around here and see what they want to ask you. And I'm going to drink some water because I need it. Anybody want to ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question about your public financing of elections.
I'm sorry, of what?
Of the public financing of elections.
Yeah.
Where you said the nominees for each of the 2 major parties. Well, doesn't that hang out to dry any potential third parties?
No, I would actually be in favor of being able to do it for third parties. I just haven't figured out the mechanism to where just anybody wouldn't start a party and we'd have to give them a bunch of money to run for office.
Okay.
I would like to create some kind of mechanism, maybe based on a number of signatures, say, that they could get on the ballot as a financed candidate.
Okay. So that's what would decide the cutoff signatures, essentially.
Yeah, that's one option. You can do other things, possibly if you can poll above a certain number. Like I said, I haven't decided what mechanism would be best. Yeah, that's really a plan we just kind of put together in the last week or 2.
Okay, now we have that awkward silence.
I know.
Anybody else have
wants to ask questions?
I have a question. I'd like to know what your stance is on gay marriage.
Gay marriage. I fully support marriage equality. And I'll tell you a couple of short stories why. Is one, my wife and I have a lesbian couple we're good friends with, and they have 2 little girls. Their names are Emerson and Nola. And I thought, I used to be a civil unions guy, and I thought, you know what, we're denying rights to those little girls that every other family in America gets. And the other reason is that my wife and I, at different points during American history, wouldn't have been allowed to marry. We're different races, different religions, different nationalities. And so somebody stood up for us, and we benefited from that. And so it's my turn to stand up for somebody else.
Do you think the states should have the right to make the laws themselves about gay marriage, or should there be a federal amendment?
Well, I think it's already unconstitutional from Loving v. Virginia. Loving v. Virginia was what they used to end racial marriage, interracial marriage segregation. And so what they said was that you could not discriminate in marriage. And so I think actually it's already unconstitutional. I don't think there's a need for an amendment. Now, I would be in favor of the Respect for Marriage Act, which has been proposed by Senator Schumer and I can't think of the other senator that was co-sponsoring it, but it would overturn DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act.
Well, that would be a good thing. Also, I think we should just be honest. Everybody in this country has a right to be miserable in marriage.
I've heard that.
Why should we exclude homosexuals? I don't get that. Okay, somebody else ask a question. Let's not have that awkward silence.
I have another one.
Yeah, I'll take another one, yeah.
I was wondering what you felt, if you're familiar with it, SOPA, the Act for the Internet Copyright Laws. Kicked around.
You know, actually I was reading a little bit about that today. I really don't, I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about SOPA yet. I just was studying up on it today, so I really hesitate to give you any kind of answer on it, because I was reading a little bit about President Obama's and how Rupert Murdoch had been responding to it today. And so it's definitely something I'm looking into, but I don't have a set position. As like I said, I just started looking at it today.
What are your views on capital punishment?
Capital punishment, I think it should be extremely rare. I'm concerned, especially if you're from Dallas County. We've witnessed District Attorney Craig Watkins here in Dallas County free. I've lost count. I know it's over 20 now, wrongly convicted men, and some of whom were facing the death penalty. And I'm forgetting the man's name that was executed because Rick Perry shut down the commission that was trying to prove his innocence. And so, if we are going to keep it, I would like to see it as rare as possible. I would like to see it only in the most extreme circumstances.
I think the West Memphis 3 would probably have an opinion on that.
They probably would. I actually just read an article about them.
I actually just watched the documentary Purgatory.
Oh, did you?
Actually, the third one. So, and it makes me not want to go to Arkansas now. Not that I ever did.
And what about was that new law passed about sonograms for women that?
I hate that bill. I'll be honest. I think it's a horrible. I think it's a backdoor way of trying to get around Roe. Is all it is. And I'd be shocked if it's allowed to stand. I know there was originally there was an injunction against it, and now another federal court has said no, you can continue until the case is done.
Right.
And so I would be shocked if it gets to the Supreme Court and it stands. But with the Supreme Court, you never know. You've got Clarence Thomas, who doesn't even ask questions now. So.
When there's that day after pill for women under 17 have to get parental permission.
Oh, you're referring to Plan B?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've actually discussed that. A woman down in Austin sent me a message on Twitter asking me about that specifically. And I knew about Plan B, and I knew about the law, and the Health and Human Services Department, I think it was, had decided not to go with the CDC's recommended of making it available for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to a few women that have actually used it, and these women were actually in favor of if you were under a certain age, having doctor guidance, because they said it's a pretty strong drug, and it needs to be taken properly. And these were women that have used it, and so I at first I was upset with the Health and Human Services Department and Secretary Sebelius, but I understand their reasoning behind it now. Like I said, after talking to a few women that have actually used it.
Thanks.
healthcare, we have more silence. I know there's questions out there.
What about the TSA?
Transportation Security Administration?
Yes.
What specifically about it?
Well, they haven't really been effective, and they
Okay.
intrude on people's, liberties. How do you feel about?
Well, obviously security is important, but I've read a few articles about Israel. Obviously, Israel has a huge terrorism problem with Hamas and Hezbollah, and they don't do all the procedures we do. What they do is they have highly trained security people who will interview people and inspect people, but not to the extent we do here. But they're much better at determining who's a potential terrorist and who's not, because they're highly trained. And I think we could avoid some of the body scanner. We're always playing catch up with the terrorists here. It's like they do something, and then we come up with a way to stop it after they've already done it, and less invasive procedures.
Now, that's another question.
Yeah.
So I'm nervous, and then all of a sudden, what about gun rights?
Gun rights. I own a couple guns. One was my great-grandfather's, and the other was my grandfather's. One of them's an assault rifle. I think we have to have some kind of responsible gun laws, such as keeping out of the hands of the mentally unstable. Like obviously, I forget the young man's name, Jared something, the one that shot Gabrielle Giffords. He had been mentally unstable and been identified as mentally unstable, and he was able to buy high-capacity magazines. Had he had a lower capacity magazine, he would have had to stop to reload much sooner. And they were able to stop him once he stopped to reload. So I think the fact that he was able to get a gun and then a high-capacity magazine concerns me. And you have the kid at Virginia Tech that had been referred as mentally unstable by guidance counselors on campus, was still able to buy guns. So I think there has to be some system for someone that's been determined by a healthcare professional as being mentally unstable, that they not be allowed to buy a weapon, at least for a certain period of time. But other than that, I don't have a problem with people owning guns.
Yeah, but do you think that everybody should be able to own an AK-47 or maybe an M60 or something like that?
I think those can be a bit excessive. I don't know. I don't have a problem with people that owning them now, but I don't know that we necessarily need to keep producing them.
Well, I don't think we need an AK-47 to go hunting with.
No, it's definitely not a hunting weapon.
Some of the arguments out there.
I don't buy that an AK-47 is for hunting. I don't buy that argument.
No, the times that I've been hunting and the times that I've fired these weapons, I've never gone out to try to kill Bambi with them so I could eat.
Yeah.
Besides, I don't think there would be much left with the AK-47.
Probably not.
Yeah. So you are in favor of limiting the type of weapons that American citizens
and high capacity magazines, because like I was saying with the young man in Arizona, he could have been stopped a lot faster, and less people probably would have been shot.
Yeah, I used to be in the Army and went through infantry training and all that, and you get to fire all these great weapons. But I don't know of any other time in my life when I would have really needed those weapons. I mean, maybe if the zombie apocalypse comes about. But other than that, I mean, really, what are we going to use them for?
Yeah.
So.
I've got a question about sex education in Texas. When I was going into 9th grade, there were already girls who were like 6 months pregnant. What do you think should be done to revamp, if at all, the Texas's sex education system?
Well, I'll tell you, my wife grew up in Stockton, California, which is in San Joaquin County, California, which is the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country. And I know that because I was there one day sitting at a mall having lunch with my brother-in-law, and I noticed a lot of 15, 16-year-old girls pushing strollers. And so I broke out my trusty iPhone and Googled it. But I think we've seen time and time again that abstinence-only education does not work. I think this is going to come off as a joke, but Sarah Palin was a big proponent of abstinence-only education, and she had a teen daughter that ended up pregnant.
You're allowed to make those kind of jokes on this show. We like to ridicule stupid people.
Well, I didn't want.
Or at least what I think is stupid.
I wasn't that concerned about Sarah Palin. I was more concerned about it sounding like I was making a joke of her daughter, but a teenage mother's no joke. But it shows you that abstinence-only education doesn't work. We have to educate our children about the responsibilities of sexual activity.
Our American healthcare system is lagging behind. A lot of Americans don't have health insurance, and Obama introduced the healthcare bill. What's your stance on that?
I think it was a good start, but it didn't do enough. It obviously hasn't controlled cost that much. I know the whole bill hasn't taken effect yet. As someone who's just had to purchase his own insurance for his family, because I've left my job to campaign full time, so we've had to purchase our own health insurance. It's still very, very expensive. And I think really it's a tragedy that we weren't able to include with the healthcare bill a public option, or I think Ed Schultz has argued that it should have been called a Medicare for All option, because we say public option, it sounds like it's optional for you to have healthcare. But I think that would have driven down costs. If you want to argue that the free market is always knows what's best, well then if you put competition out there for the free market, people are going to go with what's best. Well, conservatives also argue that government can't do anything right. Okay, well if government can't do anything right, nobody's going to buy the government insurance, are they? So it has to be one or the other. You can't make both arguments. And so I think if we would have added that extra competition, it would have forced private insurers to offer better services at better rates. So I think that's the next step for us.
Piggyback on that question, one of the issues that never really got brought up or that we never changed is the law that says you can't sell health insurance across state lines. Isn't that really part of one of the major problems of healthcare costs?
That's a big part of the problem. I actually was working for a small business. We had about 10 employees. Every year, our health insurance would jump up. Our premiums would jump 30%, and we only had about 3 companies to choose from.
Yeah.
To buy from, and it would drive my boss crazy. Every year, he would just be scrambling to find a way to still offer us health insurance, but still be able to stay in business.
Right.
And when you've only got 3 choices, it's kind of hard to do that.
Well, it kind of seems like to me that while you say it's a good start with Obama's healthcare plan, all it ended up being was a big, nice, great Christmas gift for the health insurance industry.
Well, that's actually a huge problem with it. It's given the health insurance industry a ton of new customers and not a lot of incentive to control costs.
Right, and of
but
course,
because we haven't increased competition at all, and that that's the argument I would make to conservatives is that argue that free market competition is always best. Well, let's introduce more competition. And I think there are a lot of conservatives that support allowing insurance.
I apologize to the audience there for coughing,
but I think there's a lot of conservatives that support allowing insurance companies to sell insurance across state lines. So I think we get a lot of support for that. But I also think we should have a option to purchase health insurance from the government, whether subsidized or whether you make too much money to be subsidized, but you can still buy it at an affordable cost.
or maybe the option that you don't have to have health insurance, and you can just go in and pay your bill.
Well, see, the problem with that is that we all end up paying for it in the end. Because there's a lot of people that go get health care and then don't pay for it. It drives up health insurance rates. It drives up medical costs. I know my wife and I just as I mentioned, we just had a baby. When we were checking in, didn't have health insurance for my wife. My health insurance at work didn't cover maternity. So we were looking into our various options for paying cash. If you're willing to pay doctors in a hospital up front, it drops it down about 50%, but it still costs around $12,000, and your average person can't afford that. But the reason they're willing to drop it down 50% is because most people that go all the way before they pay for it walk away from it, and so doctors take a huge cost. So I think there's some personal responsibility to ensure that you're in some form or another able to cover your own medical expenses. And maybe if we could come up with a way that you could prove that you're financially secure enough to cover your own medical care. But
Well, if you're going to run a credit report, then don't take points off my credit report because you just ran it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that goes against the whole running the credit report thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to be logical and everything.
Oh, no, that makes complete sense.
We like to make sense on this show.
Insurance companies had to spend 80% on actual healthcare costs and 20% toward overhead and profit. that's the way it was. I mean, do you think something like that should be done? And I mean, where's the cutoff on who decides what that 20% is? And
I do think with the health insurance industry, we do need to do that because you pay in and you pay in. I pay close to $600 a month for health insurance premiums, and when you go to use your health insurance, 90% of the time they fight you like tooth and nail to pay anything. And so I think that's the only way we can get them to act responsibly. I mean, because if not, insurance becomes a big scam.
yeah, a follow-up question on that is like, what happens then? Let's say multiple people, like, I used to live in Florida, and when Hurricane Andrew came in, it knocked out all the insurance companies because of that massive.
Mhm.
Well, the thing is, if they were allowed to put more money away, not have to spend it immediately, they would have been able to actually pay and keep everybody afloat on the insurance.
But that's still keeping that money to pay claims, though. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the same idea.
Yeah, but I guess it's wording, is it 80% now and then you get to keep the 20%, or is it 80% for?
No, all that it does is require you to keep. It doesn't require you to immediately spend that 80%. What it requires you to do is have that 80% for only spending on claims. And so, like the situation in Florida, you were saying if they were able to keep more of their money, they could pay more claims and not have to go out of business. Well, that's what that 80% is. It's to hold it for claims. I mean, you're not obviously every year going to have use up 100% of that 80%, but it's there to pay the claims when they come in.
Okay, back to our awkward silence.
Yes.
Nobody else has a question? Nobody. Wow.
Tell us more about yourself. Like, what's your background? You said you left your job to run,
Yeah.
and how do you plan on doing that, and just stuff like that.
Well, I'm originally from Austin. I lived in Austin until I was about 5 and moved to a little town called Scurry, which is out in Kaufman County, about an hour southeast of Dallas. Moved to Dallas and went to UT Dallas and studied political science and economics. I got out of college and I worked on a few campaigns shortly after I got out of college and realized that's not what I wanted to do. And I went to work for a couple small businesses, a small hardware store, and then a small door company, which is where I have been working until recently. And I decided that I was watching the last couple of elections, and especially 2010, and saw how Democrats were just afraid to stand up for what they believe in, at least here in Texas. And folks like Joe Lieberman, I'm really not a fan of Joe Lieberman, but I saw how Democrats have allowed Republicans to define what the Democratic Party is. We've allowed Republicans to tell Texans that we're the party that wants to kill your babies and take your guns, but really we're the party that's given you Medicare and Social Security and civil rights, and so I decided, I was like, we need to have someone that's willing to stand up for those priorities, and I also looked at the Senate. It's the oldest and richest it's ever been, like I said earlier. It's not very representative of the nation as a whole, so I thought, why not see if your average person could still get there? It's the greatest legislative body in the world, and it needs to have some regular people in there. And so let's see if the Mr. Smith goes to Washington myth is true or if it just occurs in the movies. And so that's what I set out to do, and then my wife was nice enough to be okay with me quitting my job for a year and campaigning and taking care of the baby. And we'll see where it goes. I really believe in what we're doing, and then Ryan, my campaign manager, believes so much. He's been working for free. He's volunteered. He's worked 500 hours or more on the campaign, and at the very least, we can give a voice to average folks.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so I wanted to ask one more little final question here. I've heard a lot of people refer to you as the common sense candidate, and you mentioned things that the Democratic Party stands up for. Do you think that's really true about being the common sense candidate? Because I mean, you've talked about a lot of things here, and and this is a good time to put yourself on a pedestal and tell us what you really think about yourself.
All right, that's fine. I hope I'm a common sense candidate. You know, I'm approaching issues from the perspective of your average person.
Because you are the guy from Main Street and not Wall Street.
I am. I was before I left my job, I was making $30,000 a year. I wasn't making, I wasn't getting rich, and I, a lot of candidates like to claim they represent working people. That they're the champion of the middle class, but I really think I am. I say I can stand for what average folks want because I've lived that life. I've worked those jobs. I've struggled to pay those bills, and I've had to deal with the same issues. And so I think that makes me the common sense candidate. I mean, if you look at the Republican side, all of the leading candidates
I try not to. I'm just kidding.
All of the leading candidates are either career politicians, millionaires, or both. And I would imagine it's kind of hard to relate to your average folks when you've been a multimillionaire or a career politician for a long time.
Yeah, just a little bit. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up, and I want to thank you for
Thank you.
being on the show and doing this little town hall and
Oh, yeah,
answering
I appreciate
questions
it.
and doing live streaming for, like I said, the two people that were probably had nothing better to do than watch the show.
Well, I'm glad we could make their Saturday night a little more enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. It was more entertaining.